as an economist, I'm normally quite depressed about things, and things have quite a dismal outlook. But this is one of the sort of more positive pieces of work that we've undertaken. And what we were asked to do was essentially look at the relationship between child cognitive outcomes, which is on the bottom left, non-cognitive outcomes and behaviours in childhood, with adult financial outcomes in adulthood, aged 34 and 42. Okay, so we're looking at this relationship. Now, that's not everything. As an economist, I'm going to talk about the data that we used, but we used the British Cohort Study of 1970, and this tracks individuals from the age of 0 to the age of 42. And this has been used in many, many occasions, but normally we use it to compare or to look at the impact of cognitive, non-cognitive behavioral outcomes as children on big outcomes later in life: employment, education, these very big issues. But what we're asked to do is to look at the effect of cognitive, non-cognitive behavioral skills on adult financial outcomes, and that's a very, very specific relationship. Okay. It's also the case, though, that there's a lot of things that are connected and going on at the same time. So we also looked at the impact of adult intermediate outcomes. So how does adult education, how does employment as an adult impact adult financial outcomes? But because everything is connected and everything matters, we also looked at the relationship between adult financial outcomes and other adult outcomes, predominantly health-related outcomes. And what we found, it's a bit of a spoiler alert, but we really found that everything is connected. Okay, everything matters, everything's connected. Now, so we used the British Cohort Study, and this is a study of 17,000 individuals who were born in 1970 in England, Scotland, and Wales. And it tracks these individuals for 47 years. It contains a plethora of information on health, physical, educational, social development, all these childhood factors. It also contains information on economic and labour market outcomes and other characteristics at different ages. So you have this huge data set, and it's an incredibly rich resource. And as I said before, previous analyses, including one that I did back in 1999, shows that there is a relationship between childhood skills and adult outcomes. But these are normally big outcomes, and outcomes that you would sort of say is to an economist, well, you're stating the obvious, and that's sort of true. So as an economist, I wouldn't have expected to find any relationship to last over 30 years between childhood cognitive, non-cognitive, and behavioral skills and these financial capability outcomes aged 34 and 42. Okay, so in a little more detail, we had information, or we gathered information from the survey on children and young person skills aged 5, 10, and 16. And these related to cognitive skills. Now, cognitive skills are sort of self-explanatory. Literacy, reading, general intelligence tests, in some cases, O-level performance. And these were these were either teacher assessments in general, sometimes parent assessments. We also had information on non-cognitive skills, and these are sort of softer skills. So this related to perceptions of academic ability, self-perception of academic ability, locus of control, how the individual child thought they could control events around them, their self-esteem, self-control, their social skills. So there's a lot of non-cognitive outcomes that we also considered. Behaviour. Now, normally behaviour, you think whether the child was behaving well in school or not, and standing outside the headmaster's office. It's a lot wider than this. It's really not behaviour, it's behaviours. So when we're talking about behaviour in the BCS, we talk about other sort of more movable characteristics. So things like agreeableness, emotional health, distress, neuroticism, and extroversion. So these other characteristics. And what we tried to do was find the relationship with outcomes aged 34 and 42, regular saving, pension saving, debt-to-income ratios, excluding mortgages, financial self-assessment. But the really important thing is, at the bottom, we controlled for everything that we possibly could. So we tried to strip out the impact of these other childhood factors, such as parental education, household size, number of siblings, employment status and family social status, and we tried to control for all these other factors and see what was left. Okay. Findings. Exciting. So if we look from bottom left to top right, what's the impact of child cognitive, non-cognitive, and behavioral skills on adult financial outcomes age 34 and 42? So we have information on children age 5, age 10, age 16. It's not always the same information. It's not always measured in the same way, but we generally try and look at the impact of cognitive, non-cognitive, and behavioral. So at age 16, and the darker the shading means the stronger the relationship. So what this is saying is cognitive ability age 16 has a positive effect on pension saving, controlling for these other personal and socioeconomic characteristics. It also says that non-cognitive skills have an impact on financial self-assessment age 42, controlling for these other characteristics. And quite interestingly, behaviours or behavioural scores have an impact on pension saving, debt-to-income ratio, and financial self-assessment. So some of these adult outcomes are age 34, some are age 42, and we're looking at young people age 16. So you think, well, okay, that's not so much of a push. I mean, people are formed by that stage. Well, let's go back 6 years. And here we see at the age of 10, cognitive skills have a strong positive effect on regular saving, pension saving, and financial self-assessment age 42. It's also the case that it's not just cognitive skills, it's non-cog as well. And we still see an impact of behaviours. Okay? And then if we go back another 5 years, we see that cognitive ability has an impact age 5 on financial outcomes age 34 and 42. Now that is, I'm not easily impressed, but that's quite an amazing thing, that over 37 years, cognitive ability has an impact on financial self-assessment, controlling for these other personal socioeconomic characteristics. So there's several of you who are probably thinking, well, that's just the effect. Cognitive skills, people get greater levels of education in adulthood, and that's the reason for all these relationships. So what we did was we also looked at adult intermediate outcomes. So how are these cognitive, non-cognitive, and behavioral skills channeled through other adult outcomes into financial outcomes? So is it all through, just say, education, employment, income, marital status, and home ownership? And what we do find, is that some of these intermediate outcomes do channel these skills measures when the child is young or a young person. Okay? But the interesting thing is that even though some of these skills are channeled through things like employment and income and education, there's still an effect, there's still a direct effect between childhood cognitive, non-cognitive, and behavioral skills and adult financial outcomes, even accounting for levels of education, even accounting for employment status as an adult. So these effects, this relationship between the bottom left and the top right, it still holds in many cases. Okay, and that is really, really quite amazing, that even if you account for the level of qualification, there's still an effect. What about adult financial outcomes and other outcomes? Now, this is a really important point because it's not just the impact of cognitive skills that affects financial outcomes. There's also a relationship between financial outcomes and other adult outcomes. So when we look at other adult outcomes, predominantly we looked at things like health self-assessment, mental health, absence of a long-standing illness, and life satisfaction. And what we found was there's a two-way effect. There's an interdependency between these adult financial outcomes. So you can imagine an individual who, for instance, assesses their own financial status as being, positive, generally positive. They may be, as a result, it may be because they are more likely to be in employment. The result of this is they might be more likely to save for pension, and they may have less distress or worry, and therefore have a better sort of assessment of health in adulthood. It could also work the other way around. A person who has an absence of long-standing illness might be more able to work, and therefore more likely to save for a pension, age 34 or 42. So it's a two-way effect. So take an example. So this measure of, we would just look at financial self-assessment in the first instance, age 34 and 42. So what we find when we put all this picture together is we find that cognitive skills aged 5 and 10 have an effect on financial outcomes, and in particular financial self-assessment aged 34 and 42. But as I said before, it's not just cognitive outcomes, it's non-cognitive softer skills that have an impact. Interestingly, there are several measures of behavioral skills that also have an impact at age 42 and 34. Some of this effect of cognitive and non-cognitive skills is channeled through education, attainment, and employment, but it's still the case that there's a direct impact of cognitive skills aged 10 and 16 on financial outcomes, and in particular financial self-assessment aged 34 and 42. And that's quite amazing, because that's a 37-year period. We find that there's an interrelationship between financial outcomes age 42 and other outcomes, such as health self-assessment. But we also find that financial self-assessment has a direct effect on the likelihood of having a long-standing illness, mental health index, and the life satisfaction of individuals. So what this is saying is we can't just look at financial capability in adulthood. We have to look at the determinants of financial capability, and there are many things, such as education and the nature of education, the nature of employment. There's also a role for financial education as a preventative factor. That's one of the other things we looked in the report that's published today. But it's still the case that cognitive skills have an impact, age 10 and age 16. And the whole issue is that even if the policy aim, just say, is to improve financial outcomes age 34 or 42, there are spillovers in an economic sense. There are other areas of adults' lives that are positively affected by improving financial education at the age of 34 and 42.